Almost every person watching this video believes they are trying to save money wisely, but hidden inside their daily habits is one financial mistake silently destroying their future one small decision at a time. The scary part is that this mistake does not look dangerous in the beginning because it feels normal, comfortable, and sometimes even responsible while your bank account slowly loses power behind the scenes. Every morning, millions of Americans wake up, check their phones, buy coffee, pay subscriptions, swipe cards, and repeat routines that seem harmless without realizing their money is quietly leaking away like water from a cracked pipe. Some people work 10 hours a day for years and still wonder why they never feel financially secure, while others with smaller salaries somehow build wealth because they understand one simple truth most people ignore. By the end of this video, you may realize that the biggest threat to your financial future is not inflation, not taxes, not the economy, but a behavior you probably repeated earlier today without thinking twice about it. Imagine a man earning $70,000 a year living paycheck to paycheck while another person earning half that amount slowly builds savings, investments, and peace of mind without showing off or chasing status. The difference between those two people is usually not intelligence, luck, or education, because the real difference often comes down to how they respond emotionally every time money enters their hands. Most people think money problems are mathematical problems, but in reality they are emotional problems disguised as numbers, because human beings naturally chase comfort, pleasure, and social approval before long-term security. Companies understand this psychological weakness better than most consumers ever will, which is why entire industries are built around convincing ordinary people to spend emotionally before they have time to think logically. Every notification, flash, sale, luxury ad, and limited time offer is carefully designed to trigger urgency inside your brain so you feel temporary excitement while your future financial freedom quietly moves further away. The average American now sees thousands of advertisements every single day, and many of those ads are not trying to improve your life but are specifically engineered to make dissatisfaction feel permanent. Social media made this problem even more dangerous because people are no longer comparing themselves only to neighbors or coworkers, but now compare their lives to millions of strangers every hour online. Someone buys a new car, posts a vacation picture, shows expensive clothes, or flashes luxury watches online, and suddenly ordinary people feel pressure to spend money they never planned to spend before. What makes this cycle truly dangerous is that most purchases today do not happen with physical cash anymore, because digital payments remove the emotional pain people once felt while handing over real money. Studies have repeatedly shown that people spend more when using cards or phone payments because the transaction feels invisible, fast, and emotionally disconnected from the hard work required to earn that money. This creates a silent financial trap where people reward themselves constantly in the present while unknowingly stealing stability, freedom, and opportunities from their future selves year after year. The problem becomes even worse when lifestyle inflation enters the picture, because every raise, bonus, or extra dollar earned slowly turns into higher expenses instead of stronger financial security. A bigger apartment becomes necessary, newer gadgets feel justified, expensive restaurants become routine, and suddenly income increases but financial stress somehow remains exactly the same, or becomes even worse. Many people believe wealth is about looking successful on the outside, but truly wealthy people often focus more on ownership, investments, cash flow, and long-term freedom instead of temporary appearances. The uncomfortable truth is that 90% of people are trapped in a cycle where they spend money to impress people who are too busy struggling with their own finances to truly care. At first, the cycle feels exciting because every purchase delivers a small emotional reward, almost like a quick burst of happiness that temporarily distracts people from stress, boredom, or insecurity. But over time, those emotional purchases slowly transform into financial obligations, and what once felt like freedom eventually becomes monthly payments, growing debt, and constant anxiety about bills. Credit cards made this illusion even more dangerous because they allow people to experience the pleasure of buying immediately while postponing the emotional pain until weeks or months later. Banks and financial companies understand that human beings naturally prioritize present comfort over future consequences, which is why debt has become one of the most profitable businesses in modern society. A person may tell themselves they deserve one expensive purchase after a hard week of work, but those small emotional justifications repeated for years quietly shape their entire financial future. The frightening reality is that many people are not actually buying products anymore because they are buying feelings. Identity, status, validation, and temporary escape from emotional pressure. A luxury car may look like success from the outside, but sometimes it is simply a stressed person making massive monthly payments just to maintain an image they cannot truly afford. Meanwhile, the person driving an older car while quietly investing money every month may appear less impressive today, but could eventually own financial freedom that others only pretend to have. This is why wealthy people often think differently about money, because they understand that every dollar spent carries an invisible future cost most people never stop to calculate. Spending $100 today is not always just $100, because invested wisely, that same money could potentially multiply over years into something far more valuable. Most people never develop this long-term mindset because modern culture trains consumers to think about immediate pleasure while ignoring the hidden power of patience and delayed gratification. Delayed gratification sounds boring in a world addicted to instant delivery, instant entertainment, instant approval, and instant results, but it remains one of the strongest predictors of financial success. The people who build lasting wealth are usually not the loudest, flashiest, or most admired online because they often spend years quietly making disciplined decisions nobody notices. While others chase appearances, disciplined people focus on building assets that continue generating money long after the original work has been completed. Assets create freedom because they produce value over time, while liabilities slowly drain energy, attention, and income even when life becomes difficult or unexpected problems appear. Many Americans today are trapped financially not because they are lazy, but because nobody taught them the difference between looking rich and actually becoming financially secure. Schools teach people how to memorize information, pass exams, and follow systems, but very few people ever receive real education about budgeting, investing, debt, or financial psychology. As a result, millions of adults enter the real world earning money without understanding how easily emotional spending habits can quietly sabotage decades of hard work. The saddest part is that many people only realize this mistake after major life events happen, like losing a job, facing medical emergencies, or reaching middle age without meaningful savings. That realization can feel terrifying because people suddenly understand they traded years of financial opportunity for temporary moments that disappeared almost immediately after the purchase was made. At this point, many people start asking themselves a painful question, because they finally wonder where all their money actually went after years of working harder and harder with very little to show for it. The answer is usually hidden inside hundreds of tiny financial decisions that never felt important individually but together slowly shape the direction of an entire life over time. A daily coffee here, unnecessary subscriptions there, emotional online shopping late at night, expensive upgrades nobody truly needed, and silent interest payments quietly eating away at future wealth. None of these choices seem life-changing in the moment, which is exactly why the trap becomes so powerful, because small repeated behaviors are far more dangerous than occasional large mistakes. Financial success is rarely destroyed overnight, because most people slowly drift into financial stress through habits they repeat automatically without stopping to question where those habits lead. Imagine planting tiny seeds every single day without realizing what they eventually grow into, because years later those habits become either a forest of financial freedom or a prison of financial pressure. One of the biggest lies modern culture teaches is that happiness comes from constant upgrading, as if a better phone, bigger house, or newer car will finally create permanent satisfaction. But human psychology adapts incredibly fast, which means the excitement people feel after buying something expensive usually fades much sooner than they expected when making the purchase. What once felt exciting quickly becomes normal, and then the brain starts searching for the next upgrade, the next purchase, or the next emotional reward to recreate that temporary feeling again. This endless cycle keeps millions of people financially exhausted because they are chasing emotional satisfaction through consumption instead of building stability through discipline and intentional choices. Even worse, many people begin measuring self-worth through visible possessions, which creates deep insecurity whenever they feel unable to match the lifestyles they constantly see online. Social pressure silently pushes ordinary people into extraordinary financial mistakes because nobody wants to feel left behind while friends, co-workers, or influencers appear to be living better lives. But social media rarely shows the debt, stress, anxiety, sleepless nights, or financial instability hiding behind many of those carefully edited images and luxury moments. Some people are financing lifestyles they cannot sustain simply to maintain appearances for strangers who will forget those posts within minutes after scrolling past them. Meanwhile, truly financially secure individuals often move differently because they prioritize privacy, ownership, investments, and long-term peace over short-term validation from other people. They understand that real wealth is not about impressing others, but about creating choices, flexibility, and freedom during both good times and difficult moments in life. Freedom means being able to handle emergencies without panic, leave toxic situations without fear, and make decisions based on values instead of desperation or financial survival. Most people think wealth means luxury, but for many financially intelligent people, wealth actually means reduced stress, greater control over time, and protection against uncertainty. The irony is that many people sacrifice long-term freedom just to experience temporary moments of looking successful in front of people who are often struggling financially themselves. And this is exactly where the biggest money mistake becomes truly dangerous, because people stop using money as a tool for freedom and start using it as a tool for emotional approval. Once money becomes tied to emotional approval, people begin making financial decisions based less on logic and more on how they want others to perceive them in everyday life. A person may buy designer clothes not because they truly need them, but because they fear looking unsuccessful compared to friends, coworkers, or strangers online showing curated lifestyles. Someone else may finance a luxury car with crushing monthly payments simply because driving something ordinary feels embarrassing in a culture obsessed with visible status and appearance. The dangerous part is that these decisions rarely feel irrational in the moment because emotions are incredibly powerful at convincing people that temporary pleasure is worth long-term sacrifice. Every emotionally driven purchase slowly reduces future options, because money spent today cannot later protect you during emergencies, create investments, or buy back lost time and opportunities. This is why financially disciplined people often seem less exciting at first glance, because they willingly accept short-term restraint in exchange for long-term control over their lives. They understand that true financial power comes from ownership and flexibility, not from constantly proving success through visible consumption that fades almost immediately after attention disappears. Think about how many people celebrate getting paid on Friday only to feel anxious again by Monday morning because most of that money already disappeared into habits and obligations. That emotional roller coaster becomes exhausting over time because people stay trapped between temporary excitement and recurring stress without realizing the cycle itself is the real problem. Many households today earn far more money than previous generations ever did, yet financial anxiety continues growing because spending habits expanded just as quickly as incomes increased. Bigger salaries created bigger lifestyles instead of stronger savings, which means many people are only one emergency away from serious financial pressure despite appearing comfortable on the surface. Statistics consistently show that a large percentage of Americans struggle to cover unexpected expenses, which reveals how fragile many financial situations truly are behind closed doors. The tragedy is that financial stress affects far more than bank accounts because constant money anxiety slowly impacts sleep, relationships, confidence, mental focus, and overall quality of life. Couples argue about money more than almost any other topic because financial instability creates emotional tension that quietly spreads into every part of daily living over time. Parents feel guilty when they cannot provide security for their children, while young adults feel hopeless watching prices rise faster than their ability to build meaningful savings. And yet, despite all this pressure, companies continue encouraging endless consumption because modern economies profit heavily when people keep spending emotionally instead of thinking strategically. Entire industries are built around making consumers feel incomplete, because dissatisfied people are easier to market to than individuals who already feel content and financially secure. The moment people believe happiness always exists in the next purchase, they become trapped inside a system that constantly drains attention, energy, and money without ever creating lasting fulfillment. This is why self-awareness becomes one of the most important financial skills a person can develop, because recognizing emotional triggers helps stop destructive habits before they quietly grow larger. The people who eventually escape this cycle usually experience a powerful realization, and that realization changes the way they look at every dollar for the rest of their lives. They begin understanding that every dollar represents hours of their life, energy, stress, focus, and time that can never truly be recovered once it has been traded away carelessly. Suddenly, impulsive purchases no longer feel harmless because people start seeing the hidden cost behind them, not just in money but in freedom, opportunities, and future peace of mind. $100 purchase may only take seconds to make, but earning that same amount could represent several exhausting hours spent, working, commuting, sacrificing sleep, or handling pressure. This shift in perspective changes behavior dramatically because financially aware people stop asking, "Can I buy this?" and start asking, "Is this worth the life energy I exchanged for it?" That question sounds simple, but it becomes incredibly powerful because it forces people to think beyond emotion and consider the long-term value behind every financial decision they make. Many purchases fail this deeper test because they deliver only short-lived excitement while creating lasting financial consequences that quietly follow people for months or even years afterward. Once someone fully understands this concept, they stop admiring reckless spending and begin respecting discipline, patience, intentional living, and intelligent financial planning instead. They realize that some of the wealthiest-looking people are often under enormous financial pressure, while some of the calmest and happiest people quietly live far below their means. Living below your means sounds unexciting in a culture obsessed with upgrading everything constantly, but it remains one of the most reliable paths toward financial independence and emotional stability. It creates breathing room inside life because people are no longer forced to panic every time unexpected expenses appear or economic uncertainty begins affecting jobs and markets. Financial breathing room gives people something extremely valuable that money itself cannot directly buy, and that thing is the ability to make choices without constant fear controlling every decision. Fear disappears when people build savings, reduce unnecessary debt, and stop designing lifestyles that require maximum income just to survive each month comfortably. This is why wealthy individuals often focus heavily on protecting cash flow and reducing liabilities because they understand financial stability matters more than temporary displays of success. Many financially successful people still enjoy nice things, but the difference is that they usually buy from a position of strength instead of emotional desperation or social pressure. They understand that buying something expensive becomes far less dangerous when investments, savings, and assets are already creating security quietly in the background. The average person often does the opposite by spending first and hoping stability somehow appears later, which usually creates years of unnecessary stress and financial vulnerability. One emergency expense, job loss, or economic downturn can suddenly expose how unstable many lifestyles truly are when they were built mostly on appearances instead of strong foundations. This is why economic crises hit some people much harder than others, because financial habits developed years earlier determine who survives pressure and who collapses under it. The people who prepared quietly during comfortable times usually have more flexibility during difficult times, while those living at the edge financially often face panic almost immediately. And perhaps the most painful realization of all is discovering that many financial struggles were not caused by lack of income alone, but by years of unconscious habits nobody ever questioned seriously. Once people finally recognize these unconscious habits, they often feel a mixture of regret and clarity because they begin seeing how different life could have been with better financial awareness earlier on. But regret alone changes nothing. And the people who successfully transform their finances understand that the goal is not guilt, but learning how to regain control one decision at a time. Financial recovery rarely happens through one massive breakthrough because lasting change usually begins with small disciplined actions repeated consistently even when results feel slow in the beginning. A person who starts tracking spending honestly for the first time often experiences shock because hidden expenses reveal patterns that were invisible while money disappeared automatically every month. Subscription services, impulse purchases, emotional convenience spending, and unnecessary upgrades quietly accumulate into thousands of dollars over the course of a single year without most people realizing it. That realization becomes powerful because people finally understand they do not always need a higher income first, since many problems actually begin with unmanaged financial behavior already within their control. Of course, income matters, and financial struggles are very real for millions of hardworking people. But strong habits still determine whether additional money creates freedom or simply larger financial problems later. Some lottery winners lose everything within years because without discipline, even enormous amounts of money can disappear faster than people ever imagined possible. Meanwhile, others slowly build stable wealth on ordinary salaries simply by avoiding destructive habits and consistently making intentional choices over long periods of time. This is why personal finance is often less about intelligence and more about behavior, because emotions influence spending decisions far more than most people are comfortable admitting openly. The moment people stop trying to look wealthy and start trying to become financially secure, their priorities begin shifting in ways that completely transform the direction of their future. Expensive status symbols lose some of their emotional power, while savings accounts, investments, emergency funds, and long-term planning suddenly start feeling far more meaningful and exciting. At first, this mindset can feel lonely because modern culture constantly celebrates visible luxury while disciplined financial behavior usually happens quietly without applause or public attention. Nobody posts glamorous pictures of paying off debt, building emergency savings, or consistently investing small amounts each month, even though those habits often create far greater long-term success. The internet celebrates moments, but financial freedom is usually built through years of invisible consistency that most people never notice, until the results become impossible to ignore later. Think about how different life feels when unexpected expenses no longer create panic, because stability changes the emotional atmosphere of daily life in ways material possessions often cannot. People sleep better, think more clearly, argue less about money, and gain confidence knowing they are no longer surviving entirely on hope between paychecks each month. Financial peace creates emotional peace because uncertainty becomes less terrifying when strong habits and preparation quietly support your life behind the scenes every single day. This is also the moment many people realize they spent years chasing symbols of success while ignoring the deeper security and freedom they truly wanted all along. And once that realization fully sinks in, the definition of wealth itself begins changing from flashy appearances into something far more powerful and lasting. Wealth starts becoming less about owning impressive things and more about owning your time, your decisions, your peace of mind, and your ability to live without constant financial fear. A financially free person may not always look extraordinary from the outside, but internally, they often experience a level of calm and control many high earners never truly achieve. They are not forced to say yes to every stressful opportunity, tolerate every toxic environment, or panic during every unexpected financial setback that appears in life. That freedom comes from years of intentional habits, disciplined choices, and understanding that money should serve your life instead of controlling your emotions and identity. Most people spend decades chasing income while ignoring behavior, even though behavior is often the invisible force deciding whether money creates freedom or endless financial pressure. A person earning millions can still feel trapped by debt and lifestyle inflation, while someone earning far less may quietly build a stable and meaningful financial foundation over time. This is why comparing lifestyles online can become incredibly dangerous, because people only see the visible surface of other lives while remaining completely blind to the hidden financial reality underneath. Luxury vacations, expensive homes, and flashy purchases reveal almost nothing about true financial health, because many impressive lifestyles are heavily supported by loans, debt, and constant pressure. The smartest financial decision is not always the one that gains attention today, because many wise choices feel boring in the short term while creating enormous advantages later in life. Saving money feels slow, investing feels uncertain at first, and avoiding unnecessary spending rarely receives applause. But those quiet decisions often become life-changing over enough time. Compounding is one of the most powerful financial forces in existence, because small, consistent actions repeated for years eventually create results that seem impossible in the beginning. The same principle works negatively too, because small, careless habits repeated over years slowly compound into debt, stress, instability, and lost opportunities people never expected to face. Every financial choice quietly pushes life in one direction or another, even when the effects remain invisible for months or years before finally becoming impossible to ignore. This is why awareness matters so much, because people cannot change patterns they refuse to recognize honestly within their daily behavior and emotional spending habits. The biggest money mistake most people make is not simply spending too much money, but spending without awareness while believing temporary emotions are worth permanent financial consequences. Once someone truly understands this, they stop seeing budgeting as punishment and begin seeing it as a tool for protecting future freedom and creating intentional direction in life. They realize saying no to certain purchases is actually saying yes to something bigger later, whether that means security, opportunity, flexibility, or simply peace of mind during difficult seasons. Financial discipline stops feeling restrictive once people experience the emotional relief that comes from no longer living under constant pressure and uncertainty every single month. The truth is that money alone will never automatically solve emotional spending habits, because without self-awareness, people often continue making destructive decisions regardless of income level. Real financial transformation begins internally when people stop chasing validation through consumption and start building a life centered around stability, purpose, and long-term freedom instead. And maybe the hardest part of this entire journey is accepting that nobody is coming to rescue your financial future except the decisions you make consistently from this moment forward. Governments may change, economies may rise and fall, jobs may disappear, and markets may become unpredictable, but your habits will still quietly shape the direction of your life every single day. The people who eventually build financial stability are usually not perfect people, because they simply become more intentional, more patient, and more honest about the relationship they have with money. They stop using spending as emotional therapy and begin creating systems that protect them from impulsive behavior during moments of stress, boredom, insecurity, or social pressure. Some start budgeting seriously for the first time, others delete shopping apps, reduce subscriptions, avoid unnecessary debt, or finally begin investing small amounts consistently every month. At first, those actions may seem insignificant compared to large financial goals, but over time, tiny disciplined decisions begin changing confidence, habits, opportunities, and eventually entire lifestyles. The most powerful financial shift often happens quietly when a person realizes they no longer feel controlled by every paycheck, advertisement, trend, or emotional impulse demanding immediate satisfaction. That moment creates a different kind of confidence, because true confidence does not come from showing wealth publicly, but from knowing your future is becoming stronger privately. Imagine waking up without constant anxiety about bills, debt, emergencies, or unexpected expenses, because your financial choices finally created stability instead of permanent pressure and uncertainty. Imagine having the ability to walk away from situations that damage your peace, because money no longer traps you inside fear-based decisions just to survive another month comfortably. That kind of freedom is available to more people than they realize, but reaching it requires something modern culture constantly tries to weaken, and that thing is disciplined self-control. The world profits when people stay impulsive, distracted, emotionally reactive, and financially dependent, because those behaviors create endless consumers instead of financially independent individuals. This is why becoming financially aware almost feels rebellious in today's world, because intentional living directly challenges systems designed to keep people constantly chasing more without satisfaction. The moment you begin questioning every unnecessary expense, emotional purchase, and social pressure, you start reclaiming control over a future that once seemed permanently out of reach. Years from now, your life will largely reflect the small financial decisions you repeatedly make today, because daily habits eventually become personal realities whether people notice it or not. Some people will continue spending money trying to look successful while remaining financially stressed behind closed doors, but others will quietly build real stability one intentional choice at a time. The difference between those two futures often begins with one simple decision, and that decision is whether you continue living unconsciously or finally become aware of where your money is truly going. So before buying the next unnecessary upgrade, chasing the next emotional purchase, or comparing your life to strangers online, stop for a moment and ask yourself one honest question. Are your financial decisions building freedom for your future self, or are they slowly creating a life that looks successful on the outside while feeling financially fragile underneath it all? Because the biggest money mistake most people make is not realizing that every dollar they spend today is quietly shaping the person they will become tomorrow.